97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher.
My personality is I want to win badly. I want to win more Lombardis for Philadelphia and our fans. We got the greatest fans around, and I will do everything possible.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
All right, Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. The new podcast is out right now. The next one will come out Friday at 6 a.m., and it's brought to you by Dr. Lyle M. Back. Everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery. Go to ilovelyle.com, 856-MAKEOVER for Dr. Lyle M. Back. Geoff Mosher is in the house from the Inside the Birds podcast, and he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline with the latest on the Eagles coaching search, some offseason news notes. Plus, we'll get his take on Rivers retiring and so much more as he joins us now here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Mosh, what's up?
Fellas, how you doing? Hope you guys are well on this momentous day in American history.
Yes, it's Phillip Rivers Day. He retires, and it's a great day.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at.
Hey, you know. All right, so there's so much that is out there right now with where this team stands in terms of hiring the next head coach. Let me start here. Yesterday, they added 3 names to the list that most people deemed to kind of be off the radar. What are they doing? Did any of the guys, Sirianni, Fossil, Dennis Allen, did any of those guys, in your opinion, have a legitimate shot? Like, when you heard them, did any of them raise your eyebrows like, now that guy's in the mix, that changes things?
Well, I'll take it to a broader perspective, guys. I think that anybody who sits in the chair with Howie and Jeffrey is getting a consideration, obviously, for a reason. And if they've got a plan, if they have a outline of their program, their coaches that they want, their philosophies and ideals, and it wows Howie and Jeffrey because they're always looking to be wowed, then I say that there's an opportunity for them to really, become the next head coach of the Eagles, much in the same way that Andy Reid did in 1999 when there was not a lot of buzz around him and nobody knew him, and he had that big, thick binder that he brought with him that outlined where the future of the game was going and how he was going to throw the ball all around the field as much as he did, and they blew him away. So it would not surprise. I mean, a guy like Dennis Allen has been a head coach, and he is a defensive coordinator for the Saints, who have had a very good defense and evolving defense over the past few years. So he's probably got, I would imagine, without being in the room, some pretty good ideas that he's learned from both being a head coach in a really tough situation with the LA Raiders, and then, of course, going and resurrecting his career as defensive coordinator with the Saints. And he's been around Sean Payton, so he's been in a good offensive, on a staff that has good offensive minds there, and Pete Carmichael, and of course Dan Campbell, who just got a head coaching job. And I'd say the same about Nick Sirianni being over there. He's not the play caller, but neither was Andy, right? He may have fantastic ideas on how to repair the quarterback situation here. He may be considered a QB whisperer type. And so I think anybody who has a great plan, Mike and Hunter, anybody who can wow Jeffrey and Howie with whether it be innovation or philosophy or connections to other coaches has a chance.
Okay, they have a chance. Are any of them intriguing? Any of them, Sirianni, I think, is a name that Dennis Allen's been a head coach. We've heard of him. Fossil, I don't know where that came from. Kellen Moore, he's an offensive coordinator. Dallas. Sirianni, offensive coordinator for Frank Reich. Does that say, And, for people who don't know who he is, apparently, he's a younger guy, but people kind of view him as, he's going to be the hot name or get it. Is he one of those guys that if you got to get him, you got to get him now? Obviously, because if you're going to hire a coach, you're not going to hire a coach hopefully again the next year, but maybe you jump on like Joe Brady. You get him early before you miss out.
They could be. I'm always resistant to that kind of label because sometimes guys enter the offseason as the hot coaching name. They wind up not getting a job. And then even if they do a good job, it's like their name doesn't resurface again. And I'll use Greg Roman as an example, although I there's still time. I mean, you never know. He could be brought in. But last year, there were people who felt, and he might have gotten an interview last year. I can't remember if he did or not. I thought he did, but he was kind of that rising assistant coach for what he had done with not only Lamar Jackson, but also going back to what he did in San Francisco with Colin Kaepernick, and his offensive mind is respected around the league. And everybody thought last year, oh, this guy's probably going to get a job. He didn't. And it's not, I know the Ravens were not as potent offensively this year, but they were still pretty good, and they made it pretty far there in the playoffs and obviously Lamar getting hurt didn't help their situation, but now you don't hear his name at all. So I don't know that Sirianni is a guy that you have to get now. I've heard that said about Joe Brady as well. These guys will probably get interviews again, but I wouldn't rush to hire someone just because you may not get them. You want to hire someone because you really had your socks knocked off by what they had to present.
As time continues to move forward without the hire, does that affect the possibility of Bieniemy? I mean, he was just the hottest item, and then all of a sudden there's 2 jobs left, and it's just so weird that it played out this way.
Well, it makes me wonder, Hunter, if people, Adam and I talked about this on the podcast, the Zoom interviews that are going on right now, that have gone on for coaches who are in the playoffs, I think that's really hard to make an opinion on when you just have a couple hours on Zoom. You really need to get to know somebody, and you need to sit down with them and have, multiple people in your organization talk to them. It's got to be a process that lasts several hours. So I do wonder with both Houston and the Eagles kind of I don't want to say dragging out their interviews, but taking their time and not making a rush, if that's because they're waiting for some of those Kansas City guys to maybe get knocked out early or maybe even waiting till after the Super Bowl, or if maybe Brian Daboll is still someone that both teams want to speak to. I know there was a report, I think from the Houston Chronicle, that Daboll was not going to look for a head coaching job based on what he said at the press conference. But I read his comments at the press conference. It didn't seem to me like he was slamming the door closed on it. He said he does want to be a head coach someday, and that he's just right now focused on the Kansas City game. But I didn't hear him specifically say, I'm not going to interview this year.
Well, that would be interesting if that reopens the door for him. Now, Rob Motti was on yesterday and spoke to Daboll specifically, and I think he made it sound like he was focusing on returning back to Buffalo and was going to refocus for next year. So he would be the guy that I would probably still pick at this point if he was available to me, but who knows? They got so many options out there. You were here Monday and thought that McDaniels has been is the leader in the clubhouse. It seems that there was a lot of buzz. The last 24 to 48 hours, it seemed that that's cooled off a little bit. Are we feeling any differently?
It happened.
There he goes.
The classic Mosh. He's
Mosher's
there.
in that.
There he goes.
So you can't
we
hear
got
me?
him. Well, we got you.
You're down there in a bunker, and you froze up on it.
There you go.
I had no problems earlier. I don't know why that's happened. I apologize. But I don't know that the steam is any less on McDaniels, but I do, obviously they were not in a hurry to hire him. They don't feel like they have competition with Houston right now. It's very interesting that the list of candidates that the Texans have interviewed seem to be completely different than the list that the Eagles have interviewed. So neither team probably feels rushed into making a decision right now. And Jeffrey Lurie said it was going to take time. He said he was going to cast a wide net. And again, I still think he's probably looking at other candidates to give them the opportunity to knock his socks off or blow him away until he decides to make his decision. But I don't suspect that there's any less interest in McDaniels because that was the strongest buzz that I had heard.
I'm just basing this off of the length of time it's been taking the Eagles. How much of this has to do with maybe the complete staff, the OC, the DC, all the coaches as well that they need, more so than just the guy in the head coach? Because they have a lot to figure out. It's not as easy as just like, hey, we just need a head coach. They kind of have to replenish this entire team.
Yeah, that's always a big part of the conversation, Hunter, in the interviews. It's, they want to get to know you, your philosophy, your scheme, your thoughts, but they also want to know and obviously this was a big sticking point with Doug Peterson and what helped lead to his firing, right? I mean, the staff is going to be very important here. And you can come in and tell these guys you plan to bring in X, Y, Z, and they can all be great candidates, but you also have to have the ability to bring those guys in. I mean, whether you have to have the confidence that maybe if they're under contract that they can get out of it, or if they're free agents that they're definitely going to come coach you. But you also have to sell Howie and Jeffrey on why these specific candidates are going to do the best job as Philadelphia Eagles coaches. And I would imagine that is a big, big part of the conversation in these Eagles interviews, especially because the Eagles over the last 3 years, 4 years, 5, whatever, since Doug has really became head coach, have had just way too much coaching in and out rotation. And it's not because they were losing guys to better jobs. They were just constantly hiring and firing different assistants along the way, not just on offense, but on defense too. That's not good. I think it's a bad look. It's bad for continuity. So they need someone to come in here and work with those guys on bringing in a staff that's going to be like Andy Reid's staff, if you remember, where guys were, they got promoted. They were there for a long time. And then eventually when they moved on to jobs like Harbaugh or McDermott and other guys and Ron Rivera, then Andy started promoting guys underneath them and filling their shoes. That's the type of culture and environment that they need to get back to.
Geoff Mosher, Football at 4 from the Inside the Birds podcast. It's powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, where you guys talked about Deuce Staley, and you see somebody who's listening or watching the show, I should say, on our YouTube channel. It says players are telling Lurie to hire Deuce. What about that report out there that some of the players are texting the owner and saying Deuce is the guy? I mean, ultimately, you think Jeff Lurie's feeling some pressure from, you got this whole situation where, you got the Wentz thing, how guys are going to go back to that locker room with Wentz and how that's all going to play out. And then you got some guys who are saying, no, I want this guy to be the coach.
Yeah, you know what? I think he should listen. I mean, I think it really does speak to how well that Deuce would command the locker room. And that's obviously a big part of being the head coach and having that respect. The emotional intelligence that Jeffrey talked about when he hired Doug seems to come into play here with Deuce. I don't think that's even a question that Jeffrey would have to worry about. So it does help that you listen to your players, especially your star ones, but it can't be the be all to end all. I mean, a lot of those guys who have, if they're texting him, or plenty of them have come out on other social media platforms and made their opinion known. Some of them might not be back with the team though. So you can't base your decision on what your players want, but I think Jeffrey can take this into account as if he didn't. I know he already knows it, but of the type of presence that Deuce has and the respect that he would command.
So why is Deuce, and we talked about this the other day in terms of he's got no other options, no other offers or interviews or anything. And like, I don't want to sound like the guy who's anti-Deuce, because I'm not. If they hired Deuce, I'm excited. I'm happy. I think he'd be a great leader, and I'm interested to see what he brings to the table. But if he's not the former running back of the Philadelphia Eagles, does he have the same excitement from this fan base who seems like they're excited for Deuce for that reason? You don't go and say, hey, you know what? I want the running back coach from the New England Patriots. I don't know that any other running back coach is getting any interviews or anything. So what is it about Deuce that he's not getting any other opportunities? And do you think that he is popular here based on the fact that he played here on a very popular era?
Well, I do think the fact that he's a very popular former Eagle helps, but I also think the fact that he's been on 3 different head coaching staffs and been to the playoffs with all 3 and has risen up the ranks and is the assistant head coach and has helped his team win a Super Bowl as a coach. And you look at the running backs who have performed under Deuce Staley here. You've had some great ones who are probably very talented already, like a LaShawn McCoy and Miles Sanders. But, I mean, you can't discount that Corey Clement was a Super Bowl hero at 100 receiving yards as an undrafted free agent. Josh Adams led this team in rushing a couple of years ago as an undrafted free agent. So several different styles of running backs and of different pedigrees have excelled under Deuce and have credited Deuce for their development. He's always been known as one of the best blitz pickup running backs who played and one of the best coaches of blitz pickup for running backs, which is obviously an essential part of the offense. And I would just say that I get that he's a running back, but if you're a great coach, you're a great coach. Like the Lions just hired Dan Campbell. He is the tight end version of Deuce Staley, is he not? He was a tight end. He was a tight ends coach, and then he became tight ends coach / assistant head coach. So I don't think it was his scheme that impressed people. I think it was his leadership and his command and his presence. And so he also played a non-glorified position at tight end, and somehow he was able to get a head coaching job and interviews before that. So I would never tell anybody that Deuce Staley needs to be a head coach, that they should hire him, that there's something beyond, his abilities that's holding him back. But not getting an interview, to me, is a travesty for what he's accomplished as a positional coach and as an assistant head coach, and his resume and the buzz that he's gotten out there. As Adam Kaplan reported on the podcast that we dropped today, he's talked to people in the league who have either know the Eagles or have been with the Eagles and said that they see potential head coach in Deuce Staley very easily.
What's ironic to me is, Jeffrey Lurie is big on the offense, and the offense was obviously not good enough for his liking, but Deuce has been here, as you said. Does that have any play in the outcome that we've seen over the last handful of years? Did he not have that big of enough say in, what was going so wrong with this team that they don't fully look into that? Because he was a part of an offense that wasn't successful enough for Jeffrey Lurie's liking. So I'm just trying to figure out how that connects.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. He was also part of an offense, right, that was number 2 in the league that year and won the Super Bowl, and then, scored a lot of points in the Super Bowl to beat a great offense. So I don't know how you divvy it out, but I know that if they really felt along the course of the career here, not just this past year, that he wasn't somebody that they valued that much, then why would they have continued to promote him? I mean, I think the Eagles' actions speak pretty loudly when it comes to how they've treated Deuce. I mean, how many other coaches have been with this team through the Andy Reid, the Chip Kelly, and then the Doug Peterson era? I don't know if there are any. I can't think of any off the top of my head. So I think that speaks volumes for what not only the organization felt about him, but also every new coach who came in along the way has felt about him. Remember, Chip Kelly hired and fired a lot of coaches too. And, he brought in his own guy.
Looks like Moshe hit another rough patch. It's like when you're driving on the expressway and you hit that dead spot in the right when you go under. Where is that?
I don't know, but when I take the Black Horse Pike, there's this one light where if I'm talking on Bluetooth with my father or something on my ride home, he knows. He's like, you hit that light again, didn't you?
Yeah, it's like you're on the expressway, and it's like, hey, I'm hitting that dead spot.
Yep.
That was you, Moshe. You just hit the dead spot on the expressway.
My apologies.
I want to ask you, Harris is watching on YouTube, and he put a comment on the stream, and we have it up on the screen here. He says, do you think McDaniels would be the play caller if he was hired, or would they let an OC call it? And my point is, the question that came to my head when I saw his comment is, if Deuce doesn't get the job, is he back here as a coach? Or is he just say, you know what, I'm out?
That's a great question. I think that that depends on who the head coach is going to be. I know that he was upset to be passed over when they hired Doug Peterson. He stayed with the team, though. Obviously, he had a relationship with Doug. Whoever they bring in next probably isn't going to have the kind of relationship that he had with Doug Peterson, I assume. I don't know. But I don't know that he's going to stick on. And I would imagine if Josh McDaniels gets the job, then Josh would be the play caller. But again, that's not something I'm 100% sure of.
All right. How about, if Josh McDaniels is the head coach, and we don't know this, but does he bring in an offensive coordinator? Is that something that you think Roseman and Lurie will want? Or do they want another head coach who has that autonomy to call his own plays?
I think it depends on who the head coach is, right? If it's a guy like Nick Sirianni who's never called plays before, they may be a little reluctant. If it's Josh McDaniels, they may want him to call plays, but also to have an offensive coordinator on the staff, just to have another offensive, traditional offensive position that can help contribute.
Interesting. What do you make of the reports that suggest, anyway, that they need to sell Lurie on Josh McDaniels? That Howie is okay giving up personnel to Josh McDaniels, but he needs to now sell Lurie that. Like, hey, you know what, Jeffrey? I don't need to make the picks anymore. This guy's more than qualified.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure of that one. I can understand how I can.
Got that dead spot again. You know what I mean?
Oh, I know what you mean.
Driving up the Parkway, Expressway. Parkway doesn't happen as much.
No, I normally don't take the Parkway too often.
No, not much. All right. I think He's like slowly coming back. See, I guess where he does this call to do, this
Football at 4.
football at 4, he's got down because everybody's got the situation with their kids at home. So he's trying to get to a quiet spot, and it's probably in an area that doesn't have great cell service or great internet.
I haven't had any problems up until today. So I got an Eero for my basement. It's been great. I've had no wireless problems until doing this as of late. So I don't know.
Well, we didn't hear what you said on that on the last one about Howie. Is he trying to sell Lurie?
I don't know about that. It's not something I've heard, but to speculate, I could see both sides. I could see Jeffrey really liking because of his enamored. He's always been enamored with New England's offense and him being from there. And I could see Jeffrey trying to sell Howie on it, saying, "Don't worry, he's not going to try to steal away your power." And then I could see the other side. I could see Howie being enamored with a guy who could come in here and lead this organization, and Jeffrey wondering about, well, wait a minute, as an owner, this guy just left another owner at the altar a couple of years ago. So why do I want to get involved with that? So I could actually realistically see both scenarios.
Well, let's look at it positively. What's the one thing that intrigues you the most out of Josh McDaniels?
Command. I think he would, and listen, that could wind up being a guy's downfall too. But I mean, I don't think the market and I don't think the moment will be too big for him. So I guess I'll say experience and command. Obviously, you're in New England. You're in a big market. You've coached Tom Brady. You've won a lot of rings. You have developed that offense as far as, probably being an innovator at the slot receiver position. Certainly they've found guys to be able to play that position that some people had never heard of before they played it, like a Julian Edelman. So there is innovation there as well. So I do think that he would bring a real clear perspective to the offense and bring some command and some great experience. I don't think he's going to be fazed by the Philadelphia market, having coached in New England.
It'll be interesting, too, because a lot of people think that he is a guy that will be hard on Carson Wentz.
If he gets the chance to coach him. I mean, that's a big question right now.
Well, if he's the head coach, you would think he gets that opportunity.
Well, I mean, you're assuming that Carson's all right with this and he comes back.
Okay.
I mean, they have a whole thing looming over
Okay,
this.
I'm glad you brought that up. How much say do you think Carson Wentz has on this?
At the end of the day, it depends. Do you want a disgruntled, angry quarterback in camp, battling for a position with Jalen? Or
you're a franchise
do you get a good
quarterback.
offer for him?
You're a franchise quarterback getting paid what he gets paid. They typically have a little bit of say, but are you a franchise quarterback getting paid what he got paid and got benched and didn't play very well? Do you have as much say?
You have as much say as the leverage that you try to leverage against the organization that you're with at the moment. So, like I said, nobody wants a sour guy in camp, making all a big stink. And to say that, well, Carson Wentz is not that type of guy. Well, I never thought Carson Wentz would publicly kind of let a fractured relationship get public like that. So, I think it's a big X factor. I don't know that he's definitely coming back, even if they hire Josh McDaniels.
Well, Phillip Rivers retired today. Does that amp up the possibility? Everybody says, oh, Frank Reich and the Colts. And, of course, that story specifically said, Jeff McClain's, that even Frank Reich's not sure that he wants to work with Carson Wentz again.
Yeah, and that's something that I talked about last week. I mean, we're not talking about getting a guy who's coming off like a Pro Bowl or MVP type season. We're talking about a guy who has not looked like his 2017 version in a couple of years and is coming off the worst year of his career, and now reports of a fractured relationship. I mentioned to you guys that as good of a person as Carson Wentz is, that there are people around the league who I've spoke to who are well aware of his coachability issues that have surfaced here in Philadelphia. So if if you're Chris Ballard, the GM of the Colts, yeah, you're probably kicking the tires on it. But they gave up a first-round pick last year to get a lineman from San Francisco. It was DeForest Buckner, right? Mm-hmm. So are they going to give up another first-round pick this year to not get a player who is going to be a rookie? I can't see that happening. So I can understand, maybe they'll make an offer, but is it going to be one that the Eagles are going to find acceptable? I think that's the biggest challenge here.
All right, Geoff Mosher, the Inside the Birds podcast. By the way, it looks like the Lions put a request to interview Dave Phipp, and the Eagles have blocked that. So it looks like they want to keep Dave Phipp around. So I would imagine that whoever the new coach is getting Dave Phipp to be the special teams coordinator.
Probably if they block that, although a new coach could come in and have their own guy in mind, and then, Dave Phipp can be released free agent to sign wherever he wants if they get out of the contract.
All right, go ahead.
No, it's interesting because I thought the special teams were horrendous this year.
They've been good in the past,
That's true. No, that's true. I just thought this year specifically, they had some tough moments for sure.
Moshe, you know anything about the Stoutland deal?
Well, there was that report he was going to coach the offensive line at Alabama. And that obviously is not going to be the case because Doug Marrone's going to do it. I've heard, nothing like I can nothing I can concretely report that him and the organization are kind of in it, at least with him, he's not 100% sure of what he wants to do here. I'm guessing he's waiting on the head coaching hire too. But even if that report to get out there that he had his eyes on the Alabama offensive line coach job should probably suggest that he's keeping some options open here and may not be 100% committed to wanting to come back to coach the Eagles.
All right, don't forget, Inside the Birds podcast tomorrow, Friday morning at 6 a.m. will be the new edition. The latest edition came out today at 6 a.m., so make sure everybody listening checks that out. Andrew DeCecco, I know he's foaming at the mouth to talk a little draft, so we will throw a couple draft questions his way on tomorrow's edition of Football at 4. Adam Kaplan will be here on Friday's show. He's Geoff Mosher. And this is Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. All right, Geoff, we got a lot of off-season to get into. Looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Thanks, guys. I'll try to get the hamster to run around the wheel faster. That powers my internet here, and so that we're good next time.
All right, he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. That's Geoff Mosher.